were tortured by the sirens sweetly singing.
Motivators and activists. He died in D.C. He died in Northwest on 35th and yeah, Tenleytown, yes, which is now, it's actually, that's actually I think Wisconsin Avenue now.
Tenleytown Circle there and all that, and well, D.C. inside D.C. for sure.
Right. Well, he was no longer an administrator for the. It was the National Brotherhood of Electrical Workers when it was formed then in 1892 in St. Louis, and then Henry Miller, you know, he started out as a water boy for the telegraph. Then he worked at telegraph, and then you know, he traveled around the country. He was a widower. And he really had no family ties. He moved around the country, get different boarding rooms, and work where he could.
He was about his business. He was on a telephone pole, and evidently, for some reason, he fell off the pole.
Yeah.
And he never recovered from the injuries.
Well, there was a big storm.
Okay.
There was a big storm, and he was in the upper class neighborhood there in Northwest, and he had. They had these arc lamps that were on very, very high poles because they cast such a brilliant light. And he had a 30-foot ladder that he had propped up against this pole. And he went up there, and he would have had to examine each light to find out where the problem was. And apparently he got hit by, you know, a live wire, and because there was a flash, and the guy that was working with him said that he made a noise, and he came tumbling down the ladder, and they actually collided with his working partner, and they both fell. Well, he was complaining about back problems, back pain, and they loaded him up on a Georgetown cable car, took him to his boarding house room. The doctor who put him, you know, was treating him, felt like he was going to be able to work on him in the morning, that it wasn't too serious. And he didn't lose consciousness till 4 in the morning. And then he went into a coma, and he died the next day.
On a streetcar, huh? Yeah, I remember those old DC streetcars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I vaguely do. My mother spoke of them often, and it seems to me like.
Oh, I was in the 1950s. My grandmother would take me on occasion a streetcar. They were open air streetcars, even some of them, not all of them, but they started building the metro there in the mid '60s, late 1968. Actually, they were all gone by then.
Yeah. Well, that was all. See, you know, all these cable cars in a lot of urban areas. You know, they already had a great network that would have been, you know, perfect for public transportation. You know, but then the diesel engine was created, and you know, they decided, well, we got to get rid of these tracks, man, because they ain't going to make no money on that. You know, so they started secretly buying up all that rail and all these, you know, transport cable car companies and destroying the tracks, so that people would have to rely on buses, you know, instead of just jumping on a cable car, which they already had, you know, were very efficient, really, you know.
And probably a little more environmentally friendly, too.
Well, yes, and if they had, if they would have been allowed to continue in a linear evolution, we may very well be looking at magnetic cable cars today, you know, that run on a magnetic rail, you know, which would be very cost efficient, you know, and you wouldn't have all your cars on the road. See, bingo, people would be buying gas, you know.
Yeah.
So I mean, we had these brilliant captains of industry that were prescient, saw into the future, and realized, you know, well, we got to get rid of all these avenues and and different mechanisms that the people can use that won't cost them anything.
It really wasn't a better idea, it was a more profitable idea.
Exactly. It was never a better idea.
By nature, I guess somebody would say it's better, huh? Creates jobs and things like that. So.
Well, you see, on the one hand, it creates jobs, this, destroying something that might be cheap for people to use, but if you have a lower operating cost, then you can dedicate your money to other socially elevating programs.
It creates a job because it's a job you need to buy the car, the diesel engine they want to sell you. So it's kind of like we're chasing our tail there, huh?
Well,
and that's why each evolution happens, we go further and further behind. We get more and more smog. We get more corporately dependent.
Yeah.
And I just want to say a few things too, but going back to the West Virginia coal miners strike, you talk about it.
Yeah, I want to get back here too. I want to talk about King Coal.
Saying National Guard, I mean, we're talking about the turn of the century and stuff. When we're talking about militias, they used to train to fight the British. That's what they were. That's where the roots of the National Guard is. It goes back to even before this country. And they basically there to protect, where the citizens band together to protect each other from outside invaders. And now you're saying...
Yeah, but it wasn't a standing army.
By the time of 1912 or so, or the Mattawan, you're saying that these people were actually used on residents of the state that shouldn't be making up the militia itself.
Right. Well, they were Pinkertons. They were like they were hired guards, like Blackwater. Well, they started out as like Blackwater is today. Okay, a lot of them were ex-military, and then they would get hired by the coal company, and that was the mining guard system, which were Pinkertons.
Okay. But you say the governor, the commander-in-chief called in the National Guard at some point. Okay, and
that's
the militia, the local militia there, right, of West Virginia. And like I said, that's the group that's organized by the residents and by the coal miners themselves should be part of this militia.
No, there was a National Guard when the West Virginia thing happened, Michael. The Ludlow incident, when Woodrow Wilson was president, the governor, the miners called Woodrow Wilson and told him, stop this. But the governor was good buddies with Woodrow Wilson, and, he said, no, I got it handled. Don't worry about it, but they ended up having to send the army in. There was no National Guard in Ludlow.
Okay, maybe not in Ludlow. That's Colorado, right?
And Ludlow happened before.
Okay. I would think that every state has had a militia since at least the 13 colonies anyway.
Yeah, but we're talking about National Guard now. You were saying...
I say National Guard, but the National Guard is nothing but it's a continuation of the militias that were formed before the 1776. That's the Minutemen. The Minutemen in Boston and
the Minutemen, right?
And New Jersey,
Well, Jefferson was against a standing army. He thought that every locality should have militia men and people that would train, on their off time so that they could rally if they needed to. But he didn't want a standing army.
Okay.
And I think there's a lot to be said for that, too. I mean, we talk about all these different industries that have become dependent now. Like we're dependent on them because they're so big. Every time I go up to Richmond Harbor here in California, I see all these mothballed battleships and all this bullshit, man. what's it all doing there? I mean, it's junk. They're never going to use it again. You know.
What are you talking about?
I'm talking about, you know, up in Richmond Harbor, you know, and up in Benicia, where they had the, you know, the Kaiser shipbuilding company. You know, they would build submarines and battleships and all this crap. You know, California. Yeah, and I mean, they got all these mothballed battleships and old aircraft carriers and stuff just sitting out there, just rotting, you know. And, you know, we're always trying to build the next best thing. Well, I don't understand that, really. You know, my father had a great philosophy. He said, buy it new and make it do, you know. And they keep saying they need all this new stuff. They don't need new stuff, you know. All they need is stuff that is efficient, that they can maintain, you know. And we keep paying for all this R&D, which is actually just padding the pockets of contractors, you know, and politicians.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, well, you understand.
But getting back to West,
we don't. Let's not stop talking about standing armies and stuff, and let's start talking about.
Let's get back to West Virginia, and we're talking about King Coal, which was, you know, that was the big thing then. You know, they when they started refining oil and they got kerosene, that was huge. But coal forever, you know, up until that point, and even still today, you know, has been one of the main fuels. And for many years, southern West Virginia produced more bituminous coal than any other region in the country. The coal boom began simply as operators opened small mines with little money. The coming of the railroads changed everything, as hundreds of independent operations sprung up in Fayetteville and Raleigh counties in the 1870s. Within months of the C&O's arrival in 1873, Joseph Bury opened the first large-scale mine in southern West Virginia at Quinemont in Fayette County.
The C&O Railroad?
The C&O Railroad, yes.
Okay.
That's correct. And after the N&W's completion, Northern and Western Railroad. Bury also became a pioneer in the flat-top Pocahontas coal field. By the end of 1870s, the New River coal field produced more than 365,000 tons of coal annually. That's a lot of coal.
So the railroad industry, especially the freight industry, on this coal around kind of, this growth was parallel to the coal mining growth, the coal industry.
Yes. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It was. Well, it was just like jet fuel. You know, it was the same thing. Transportation, main transportation device of the day. You know, and they had to fuel it.
Yeah.
You know, investors in the N&W realized the C&O's error in not acquiring valuable coal lands during, you know, near its tracks. Steel mills, you know, factories, you know, any kind of fabrication, blacksmiths, you know, and railroad. I mean, you know, the railroad itself consumed a lot of coal, but the industrial age, you know, when you know, people started running a lot of machines, steam, you know. And a lot of homes still use coal for their main, you know, fuel for heat. So it was in huge demand. Now, you know, coal really, you know, is decomposed wood, basically, is what it is, you know. And because the Appalachian Mountains are the oldest mountain chain in the North American continent, that's why it had the highest grade of biluminous coal.
Biluminous coal, right?
You know,
Mm-hmm. And bituminous is like, I suppose, anthracite, right? I mean, there's two major types of coal there.
One's
a soft coal, one's a hard coal.
Yes, one has more sulfur in it.
Yeah, and I know that something else that really increased the demand for coal was electricity, the use of electricity. A lot of coal-fired power.
Yes, well, and it was DC powered in too. There wasn't AC until Tesla.
Mm-hmm. So.